All right. Welcome back, y'all. Two things, go ahead and open up, so on today's date, actually several things. So there was a quiz that was due today and I didn't open it till this morning. So I've extended the deadline till midnight tonight, as I always do if something like that happens. So, but I've gone ahead and opened up the remaining quizzes over the next couple of days. So they're open as well. So if you just get on a roll this weekend and you want to roll forward, that's fine. But I have opened up all the quizzes, and the one that was due before class today is now due at midnight tonight. So just knock it out right after class. If you tried to find it, my apologies. Otherwise, let's check who is here real quick and point out that for next class, the homework is that you need to have your, where's it at? You need to have your all of your audio files loaded in. I'll have to find it. So I guess it's right here. So a screenshot of your audition session with your dialogue recorded and cleaned up and all of your sound effects loaded in on tracks. Today, we're going to start walking through the process of mixing them. So you got time last class, and then since then to be able to go and find your sound effects using all of these YouTube free music library or any of these free sound effects libraries to find them all. How many of you already found the bulk of your sound effects? Great. Okay, so you can import them directly into Audition and at least kind of start roughly laying them out. So, so get those in, grab a screenshot, and that'll be the quiz, or the homework rather, and then the quiz will be up and over the LinkedIn videos. So, but for today, we're going to walk through, and one of the requests last semester was I had everybody, when we started talking about mixing, I was demoing from one session, but everybody was mixing on their own session. And one of the things people said was, hey, it'd be nice if at least when we were going through the mixing portion, we were all just working on the same thing so that we could see and work on the same files instead of that I have totally different sound effects than you and that sort of thing. So that's what we're going to do. Going to go through this mixing demo today and walk through the first few steps of this 8 steps to mixing audio stories. Now, the good news is mixing can seem a little intimidating at first, but we don't need to, Michael, can you let her in? But we don't need to worry about it, because learning how to mix something like an audio story is actually a much simpler process than learning how to mix something like a full 48-track music song with all sorts of different sounds that have to be massaged just so to fit. So we're going to go through and we're going to be mixing this using this 8 steps to mixing audio stories. Now, just as a reminder, for next class, I'll be out of town. And so I've got 2 things. One, you're going to keep working through this, how to mix audio stories that we're going to start here today. But also I've done a full video here from a couple of semesters ago, kind of going from start to finish in 50 some minutes. So in about 50 minutes, I go through, and let me just pause this real quick. And I go through and actually produce and create and add sound effects and clean up and mix the whole thing. So I introduced a lot of those things here inside of Adobe Audition. So you should be able to kind of see the whole overview of the process. So, and that should answer any questions that you might run into along the way. So that is what you'll be doing next time during class. And just continuing to work on mixing your story, continuing what we start today. Then what I've done is added one extra day here to where next class, or a week from today, when we come back together again, I'm going to go around and listen to what you've got so far so that I can make mixing recommendations, and we can go through and do a final pass together, making the final tweaks and finishing out your audio story. So that's what we'll do next week. But that means if you just take the day off on Thursday and you just don't do the things, your work is not going to be anywhere close to done. So as we go through this today, I'm going to make sure that you understand the pieces, and then you can continue to work through your own project on Thursday. Yes. Just Thursday. Yep, just this Thursday. So I've already got this video up here for you. All right, let's see who is here real quick. And go from there. Let's see. Ryan is here. Katie is here. Ellie, not here. Abby is here. Kavaris is here. Daniel, not here. Lauren Jones is here. Natalie's here. Jesse's here. Matt Lewis, I don't see. Gabriella is here. Lauren Neely is here. Michael's here. Allie, no, Allie, and Katie is here. Awesome. All right. So let's jump on over here, and I'm going to go ahead and open up this project. Let me copy it over to my desktop real quick. Paste it in there, and I'm going to open this up. Now, a couple things just based on some questions that I've seen from people so far. when you are saving your Audition project, if you copy files into it, they should be copied into a folder right next to your session file. Several people have come to me and said, hey, like, I don't understand, I got this session file, but none of the audio is in it when I open it up. And this is a very common thing. You need to actually make sure that the files are in right beside it. So this one that you just downloaded for me, so go download this and open it up. And you should see it should open up because it's got all of the audio files in right next to it. So let's get it open here real quick. And then we're going to walk through the steps of mixing this, using this 8 steps to mixing audio stories. All right, this a little bit, moving down to the bottom. All right, so if you would, go ahead and click open that next link, the 8 steps to mixing audio stories. And we're going to walk through this process. Okay, now in his case, he's actually got some other files that he walks you through. And one other big difference, he is showing you how to do this inside of Pro Tools. Pro Tools is a different audio workstation, but you'll notice it looks very similar to ours. And so I'm going to show you everything that would be different between the two, or at least where to find them inside of Adobe Audition, so you can still follow along with what he is showing us. So here's our first, or here's the 8 steps that we're going to use to mixing these audio stories. First, we need to organize our tracks and files and names. So we need to organize it all in a way that makes sense, so we don't have files scattered all over the place. Then we're going to do what we call roughing in the levels. That means getting all of the tracks to an approximate starting point where you can hear all the important stuff, but you haven't taken a bunch of extra time to go through and fine tune every word and make sure that every little thing is in the exact right level. Then we're going to listen to the files and figure out whether they have any tonal problems. Maybe there's some excess woofiness on one track, or maybe there's too much sibilance on another track. So we can use what we call an EQ to adjust, to remove excess high or low frequencies, or to boost parts of the sound that we want to hear more of. Then we'll see if we need to use compression. In other words, if the sound is too loud and too soft sometimes. If it's too loud and too soft, we need to squeeze that to compress it so that the dialogue is more consistent. It's going to be at a normal, average, consistent level, and we won't have some words that are poking out and other words that are getting lost. So we're going to determine that, and then we'll check our edits and fades. Finally, we'll go through and we'll fine tune our levels, making little adjustments using keyframes or automation to make sure that every word and sound is exactly as loud as we want. Then we'll balance the ambience and music and do a final listen back, making sure that it sounds the way that we want. So step 1, we got to organize our tracks. So we need to organize our session and make it to where we know what each piece is at a simple glance. So here's how it says to arrange your tracks in this order. So it says the host or reporter audio, that's going to be our dialogue in this audio story. Actualities and guest audio, in other words, additional voices, sound effects, little things that we plugged in. We talked about these as sound effects last time. Then any ambience or room tone, the sound of the environment and the room that we're in. The music track that's supporting our story, and the master track. So first we need to go through and organize the clips and the tracks. So let's switch over here and do a quick organization. Now, right now, this is in actually pretty close to that correct order. The dialogue track is here at the top. We've got some of these zombies and scary sounds on other tracks. But down here on sound effects 4, I notice we've got multiple sounds that are not the same sound. So right here, for example, there's some sort of rapper sound. And right here, we've got some sort of like chain dragging sound. So we know that those are not the same track. They shouldn't be, or they're not the same sounds. They shouldn't be on the same track. So let's go through and fix some of these things. First off, I want to put this on its own track. So under the multi-track menu, you'll see tracks, and then either add a mono or a stereo audio track. Which one should we use? Well, let's look and see. Notice how when you look at this sound, it has a waveform on the top and on the bottom. Does everybody see that? Actually, a lot of these sounds have a waveform left and a waveform right. So in a stereo clip, it's actually got different sounds on the left and the right side. That creates the illusion that that one sound is maybe more on one side and one sound is more on the other. Actually, not even the illusion. This one, however, does it have 2 waveforms or just one waveform going all the way through? One. So that's going to be a mono track. So let's go to multi-track, add mono track, and let's put this wrapper on its own track. So I'm going to take it, and be aware, if you click on something to go to move it, it's very easy to accidentally move it in time too. So when you click and drag, if you hold the shift key down, you'll notice you cannot move it right or left. You can only move it up or down between tracks. So I want you to drag that over to the wrapper to its new track. And then let's go name all these sound effects tracks. Instead of sound effects, let's name them what they are. So this one is zombies eating. This one is horror scary sound. This one is some sort of panting. This one is growls, and this one is wrapper, because they're opening up some sort of candy wrapper. Throw me a thumbs up once you've got those things in place. Download the whole thing. Go back one and download that whole thing. All right. Next, we need to arrange these tracks in order. So here you can see that some of them start later. This wrapper starts earlier. So to rearrange the track, you simply hover your mouse over the left-hand side, just like this, and click and drag it up. Since this clip comes earlier, if we make it to where, as we move left to right, the things that happen more earlier in the story happen actually higher in tracks, it's a little easier for us to keep things organized. So by dragging this to where the clips are to the degree we can left to right, is going to make it to where, as we move through the story, we'll just keep moving down through tracks. Now, let's go down to these last couple of tracks, our ambience track, our birds track. These are both kind of being used to create the sound of the environment. So let's rename those properly: ambience birds and ambience wind. And we'll leave the last track as music, since that's what it is. I'm going to save my work. Now, on today's date, this mixing demo is the very first thing, and download the whole thing and open up the 8 steps to mixing audio stories. All right, throw me a thumbs up once your tracks are nice and organized. Sweet. All right. And let me make sure actually that my audio is going to the right thing. All right, we there? All right, now just for kicks, I'm going to just hit play. What I've done is I've gone through and I've zeroed out every track here so that they're all the same. They're all set to 0 volume wise. Just make sure all these growls are also showing a little bit of automation. So, and if you don't recall, the # key will zoom us out until we can see everything. So if we're accidentally zoomed in vertically or horizontally, # will zoom us out horizontally, and Option # will zoom us out vertically so we can see all of our clips. All right, we ready? Okay. So now with all of this in place, we need to go through and do our dialogue first. So who's ever been involved with like a school play? You didn't download the whole folder, you just downloaded the session file. That's why all the audio files are missing. So just to point this out again, everybody, when you download a Audition session, actually every kind of audio workstation except for GarageBand does not store the files inside the session file. They store it right next to it in a folder. So make sure that you've got the audio files in a folder right next to the .sesx file in order for that to work. All right, so if I just hit play right here, tell me if it sounds perfectly mixed or whether it needs any additional work. Okay, thanks, Matt. All right, so Matt could tell that this was not yet mixed. All of the sounds are the same volume. Everything is competing. Things like the rapper are louder than the dialogue. If you've ever been in a school play or anything, especially if you go, has anyone ever been to like a elementary school play, like really poor production quality, right? All the lights are up, the kids are just walking around. It's difficult to tell what you should be watching because there's just chaos and everything is lit all the same. You go to a nice production and what do they have to tell the audience where they should be looking? A spotlight. And that spotlight or lighting designer is crafting where the audience should be looking by pointing it around. So in the same way, that's what we're going to be doing with mixing. So we have to determine who is our star and what's the thing that needs to be the loudest all the time. So that's going to be this dialogue track, right? Our dialogue is the key. Everything else is supporting it. If there's a word that we can't hear at the end of the mix, we haven't done it properly. If there's a sound effect that's louder than the dialogue, unless it's supposed to be for part of the story, it doesn't make any sense. If the music is clashing with our dialogue, we need to reduce the music in some way. So let's walk through how we can do this in a simple, systematic manner. First, we need to have our mixer window open. So go to your window menu and open our mixer window. With these two windows and the essential sound panel, we're going to be able to just move back and forth between them pretty easily. So now with this mixer window open at the top of the main window, you can actually just switch back and forth between the mixer and the editor. So option 2 will also just turn the mixer on and off. So option 2 will get us mixer or no mixer. Now look at the bottom. This window shows us all of our tracks. There's our dialogue, rapper, zombies, etc. If we're going to mix inside this mix window, it's better to have the tracks named for what they are. Otherwise, we have to switch over to the editor window every time to figure out what's on that track and what I should do to turn it up or down. But here's maybe the simplest and most important thing that we can do. We want to get our volumes to some consistent levels that are universal across the industry. So I'm going to go to my mix track, and over here on the very side, the mix master track is just going to combine the output of all of these tracks. So when we turn things up or down, we see that the volume going to the master track is a combination of all of those things, prominently. So if I go through and I option click these faders, they'll pop right back up to full volume, but things are still way too loud. So two things. Let's go to the effects slots. You'll notice there's these rows of effects slots for every single track. Any effect we put in one of these slots will affect all of the clips in that track as they play through. So on our mix master fader, I'm going to click on this little first effect slot with the arrow. I'm going to go down to special and I'm going to choose loudness meter. Special loudness meter. All right, now the standard that he is referencing when he goes through, actually after he's organized the tracks, here you can see some examples of that, we get to step 2, roughing in the levels. That means just going through the tracks quickly, comparing them to a known average loudness for dialogue or sound effects or music, and then adjusting the overall levels until things are pretty close to that level. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to have some words that are too loud or too quiet, but if we just get it close, then we can kind of go through and get everything close, make some other adjustments or corrections, and then we'll do another pass at the end where we fine-tune things, bringing up the odd word that's too quiet, bringing down the loud sound that's a little too loud. So now we need to go through and rough in our levels. So we're going to use a loudness meter. Now, he uses this one called Insight. We can go to ours. And we just clicked on that first slot, went to special and loaded up the loudness meter. And if you close that window, you can open it up again just by double clicking. So double clicking on it will open it up. Now this loudness meter, when we hit play, is going to show us different ways of measuring the loudness of the audio. So if I just hit play right now, all of the tracks are playing. And we can see that this whole thing is showing how many loudness units are actually playing through. Now, after you've done this for a while, you'll have to reset it every once in a while. So you can click this reset meter. And now if you're trying to solo and listen to just one track or another track, we can reset it and just solo it and see how that track is doing. So hit play real quick, pop your headphones on and just listen to the overall level of all the tracks mixed. There's no way to be doing this without headphones on. You can't hear anything. So don't even bother making adjustments if you're not listening to it. All right, now pop back over to me. So simple step number one, if we get the dialogue in the right place, then at the very least, everything else we should be able to make adjustments to. We'll use these same tools, but by ear. If something is louder than the dialogue or making it difficult to hear, that thing needs to come down. But here's our process. First, I'm going to come to my dialogue track and I'm going to solo it. And you can do this over in the editor window. A lot of times I'll do this here from the editor window. The solo button is going to obviously mute all the other tracks. They'll go gray. But then as I hit play, I can see what the level is as it's playing back. Because since it's soloed, I'm only seeing essentially the loudness of that dialogue track. So when I hit play and let it play for a little while, you can see that it's averaging pretty close to -24 loudness units. And that's one of the standards. There's a lot of standards out there. YouTube says upload their stuff at -13 to 15. Spotify, I think, is -18. Broadcast is -24. Some of them are -18. So we're just going to go with -24 since this is one of the standard levels. But if you know that you're mixing something specifically for a specific platform, then it's good to just Google what are the audio level recommendations for that platform. And it'll tell you how many loudness units. So we're going to look at this integrated loudness units. That's the main one because that's going to try to average out the loudness thing over time. And we can see this dialogue is actually pretty close to -24.
The last box of 20.
So let's go through now, though, and try to even it out even more. Now, if you remember on the last, in the Premiere projects, we use the Essential Sound panel. So if you don't see it, go to Window and open up the Essential Sound panel until it pops up right here. With the Essential Sound panel open, select this, and we're going to choose which type of audio is it. Is it dialogue, music, sound effects, or ambience? Dialogue. So I'm going to click on dialogue, and that's going to tag it and give me all 4 of these options. Now, we're only going to use the very first one for now. So I'm going to toggle open the very first option, which is loudness. And in that case, it says we can either reset it, or I can just click now auto match, and it'll automatically match the clip to a standard average level for dialogue. And you can see that it actually, the waveform got just a little bit taller. And so now it actually has adjusted that. Now notice it only did this one clip, and that's because clips are, audio clips are independently, every one needs to be tagged. So I'm going to select this other one over here and tag it as dialogue as well and auto match that level. Got it? Okay. Now let's open back up. I'm going to go open up that mixer. Open up my loudness meter again. And let's just see how it sounds now.
He's the last box of Twinkies that
Let me reset it just so I can make sure that the dialogue is all I'm seeing.
He's the last box of Twinkies that I or anyone would enjoy for all the time in the whole universe. So there's an expiration date on Twinkies.
So over time, this is actually looking just a little too, it's pretty close.
Last little Twinkie cake.
But it looks like it's at negative 22.6 LUFS. And if we're aiming for around negative 24, we just want to turn that level down just a hair. How do we do that? Well, I can simply pop over to the mixer, come to this fader. And in this case, this little meter here on the side is not measuring loudness units, it's measuring decibels. But if we see we just need to bring it down maybe 1.5 loudness units, we can kind of approximate decibels for that. So here you can see my fader is sitting at 0, which means it's not turning the sound up and it's not turning the sound down. But as soon as I pull it down just a little bit, I can see my numbers down here saying it's now at negative 1.2. Does everybody see that in the lower left corner? So let's bring it down maybe 1.5 and hit reset and play.
He's the last box of Twinkies that I or anyone would enjoy.
And as it continues measuring the audio,
there's an expiration.
it gets closer and closer. And now that dialogue is right around negative 24. So go through, get your dialogue dialed in to around negative 24 loudness units. Correct. Yeah. You solo track everything else. Yes, because we're setting our dialogue right now. Negative 24 loudness units is what we're measuring towards. Yeah. All right. But getting that dialogue to about negative 24. All right. Also, I'm recording this class in case you need to go back to it later. But once we're there, looks like our dialogue should be sitting in the right place. And now we're ready to go in and kind of rough in our other tracks. So let's do this. I'm going to go and start with the dialogue. And let's go down and add in the music. So I'm going to go down to the music track and solo that real quick. So at the very bottom, let's go solo out the music track. Since the music in my audio story, at least, is going to kind of continue throughout the whole dialogue, we should kind of average it out too. So I'm going to select that and come to my essential sound and tag it as music. Similar to the dialogue, I can toggle open this loudness and I can auto match it to a level for music. And you'll notice that just made the music quite a bit quieter than it was. So now how do we know if we've got a good starting point? Well, it's time to add in the dialogue. So I'm going to add the dialogue track into solo. So now both the dialogue and the music track are soloed. And let's hear if the music is overwhelming the dialogue or if it is supporting the dialogue.
He's the last box of Twinkies that I or anyone will enjoy all the time in the whole universe. So there's an expiration date.
Is it in a pretty good place? Roughed in it as like just making sure we can hear both? Yes. I still think some of the music is maybe making the dialogue a little hard to hear, but roughed in, that's where we're going for now. So go ahead and rough in that music. Yes, Michael. It's going through and analyzing in the same way as when we put that loudness meter on this mixer and we played the dialogue track through it. And it's sitting there analyzing the audio for loudness units on average. Short term is how many loudness units right now. Integrated is over time. What's the average volume of this? So when you're hitting that auto match, my guess is that it's just analyzing the audio all the way through. and then adjusting it so that the average loudness drops to -25. Now, the problem with that, we're going to see here in just a second, because if the music or the sound is really inconsistent and has some loud parts and quiet parts and loud parts, sometimes when it tries to auto match it to an average loudness, it'll be way louder than you intend because its average loudness is still that quiet volume, but its momentary loudness might be really loud. In fact, we'll see that in just a second. All right, so now we've got our music auto matched. Let's go ahead and add in some of these ambience tracks. So I'm going to solo my ambience wind. Let's call this an ambience sound and do the same thing, loudness auto match. Now, sometimes you'll get this thing where it says not matched, like it'll just fail. So I typically will reset it and then auto match it again. Sometimes it just does not want to accept it though, but we'll just keep trying. Worst case, we're going to do it manually. Because we could do exactly what we did a minute ago. It says that the ambience should be matched to what? -30 loudness units. So I could always come in here and adjust the level of this ambience down a little bit until it's at -30. I have to reset this. And we're getting closer. All right, so that's just one starting point. Again, we don't want to spend a lot of time on this. This roughing in process is just going through and quickly getting all of our levels into a place. Ambience on my little Tweety birds. Let's try to auto match this. That auto matched. It really does not want to do that ambience track. And now let's see, once you've auto matched your dialogue, ambiences, and music, let's see how they sound together.
There's a box of Twinkies down in that menu part. Not just any box of Twinkies, the last box of Twinkies that I or anyone will enjoy all the time.
All right, Tweety birds seem a little loud, but again, it's a rough in process. We're just getting it roughed in. So go through, use your auto match to rough in your music and your ambiences. And then let's zoom in on this first sound effect, the wrapper. Right, throw me a thumbs up when you're there. So we've tagged our dialogue as dialogue, we tagged our music as music, we've tagged our ambiences, and we used auto match. And on the occasions when it wouldn't auto match, we can just go through and we can either adjust its mixer fader level, or if it's one whole clip like this, we actually can also adjust its clip volume here at the bottom of the essential sound. So if you just wanted to turn the whole clip down, you could grab this and make adjustments. But we'll look at that here right now with this wrapper. So let's go to this wrapper and see what happens when it comes in. Okay, how's the sound of that wrapper? This is supposed to be a Twinkie that they're like unwrapping in kind of the background. Little loud, isn't it? So I'm going to select that, tag it as a sound effect, and then let's see what happens with the loudness in here. If we hit auto match, it doesn't look like it got quieter. It looks like it got a fair sight louder. In fact, if I hit play, it's crazy loud. So especially with sound effects, and in this case, you can see this one is got a lot of really loud peaks and a lot of really quiet parts. So auto match does not do as well with sounds like that. So what can we do? Well, in this case, maybe just reset it. I don't need that loudness, but I just want to bring this overall clip down. Now I could come and just adjust its fader and pull this fader down. Can everybody see that? Since it's the only sound effect on that track, I could just pull the fader down. But what if later on, I want to put more of them in there and I want them to be different volumes? So most of the time, if something is a little one shot and it just needs brought down or up in volume, that's where I'll come over to my essential sound. And with this clipped volume at the right-hand side, I can just adjust that. Now, how much do you adjust it? Here's your rule of thumb. 3 dB is the first increment where most people will say, oh, that's definitely louder or quieter, 3 dB. You can hear 1 dB. You can hear, if your ears are trained, you can hear less than a dB. But 3 dB is going to be the first chunk where you go, yep, it's definitely louder or quieter. So if I go, this needs turned down a lot, I'll usually turn it down multiple 3 dB chunks. So if I grab this and go, let me just loop around this. By the way, let's go ahead and set up a loop around it. So go right to the beginning of the wrapper, set your in point with the letter I, go to the end of that wrapper and set the out point with the letter O. And if you come down to this little loop playback button next to your record button, if you turn it on so it's bright blue, now it'll just sit there and play this section over and over. So go ahead and set a little loop on this so it plays this section over and over. Once you've got that, grab this clip volume, and here's how I would do it. If something is really loud like this, a lot of times the easiest way is to just pull it all the way down and then raise it back up until you can hear it. So that'll look like this.
There's an expiration date and hostess factories. There's an expiration date and hostess factories.
So do that, pause it, go through, hit play, and now just bring that up until you hear it starting to creep back into the mix. But it should definitely be subservient to the music and the dialogue. If you don't have headphones on, I don't know how you're doing this. You can't hear it if you don't have headphones on. Pull it all the way down and push it all the way back up. All right, now let's go through and do that to things like our zombies. Ready to do the zombies? Okay, so I'm going to come over here. If you look at my screen, this loop section that I've made with my in and my out points, I can just make a new one, set my in point over here, set my out point there. But what if you want to get rid of this section entirely? You can just right click on it and you'll see the clear the time selection, or the shortcut for it is the letter G. So you can just do that. But if I'm trying to set this next one, I'm going to go to the beginning of it, in point, out point, and let's listen to it. Select this clip. Too loud or too soft? Pretty loud. I'm going to tag it as a sound effect. Go to loudness, try to auto match this. It looks like it got quieter, but it's still too loud. So I'll grab the clip volume, pull it all the way down, and then start to ride it back up as it loops.
Now, truth, you probably won't survive the next 2 minutes. But if you do, now truth, you probably won't survive the next 2 minutes. But if you do.
All right, and that gives me a pretty good balance, just something in the background. Again, don't spend a lot of time. You're just trying to rough this in. All right, pop back to me. You're roughing in that sound, but take a look at this. In this case, I had multiple zombie sounds here, but I wanted it was just a short sound effect that I found.
Now, truth, you probably won't survive.
But I wanted that zombie sound to last longer than just the few seconds that it has. So how do we copy a clip so that we can loop it or play it over and over? We what drag it? Option drag. So by option dragging this clip, you'll notice also that when you overlay a clip on top of one another, it actually automatically fades one out and fades the next one in, so that if I solo it, it just makes that sound extend because it repeats it over and over while fading them together. Notice though, if I did not overlap them and I just left a gap, it just goes away and comes back. So let's make sure that we overlap them so that there's some nice fading going on between. And by option dragging, the next two are now the exact same volume as I said on the first one. All right, go through and really quickly make this adjustment to the other clips. There's a few more horror effect sounds, so I'm going to tag them as sound effects. I'll try auto match. That made it louder. Let me give it a listen. If it's too loud, I'm going to bring it down in 3 dB increments. Maybe I'll try 6 first. Pretty loud. Let's maybe double that, -12. And that was maybe too much, so I'll make it back to -9. And that's a good rough in. So I'm just going to copy it over to this next place too. Delete that one and option drag. Keep going. Quickly go through, match your sounds, solo them if need be. Way too loud. Bring it down, bring it back up. Just roughing things in. Sound effect, auto match, that's adjusting it too much. You can bring that down a little bit. And then make copies. Once you've done that, you should get to a point where all of your clips are audible, but without being overwhelmed, and your dialogue should still be
There's an expiration date.
the main thing. All right, keep working on that for a second.
Come on.
You have to select the clip you want to work on. So you need to have, you've got your time range selected, use your regular move tool. So you got to use your move tool. Same as Premiere, same as Photoshop. Move or switch to the correct tool. There you go. Now we select it. Match. All right. Once you've got those close, does everybody understand the process? All right, pop back up to me then.
The last box of 20.
Now, how's this as a starting mix?
All the time. The whole universe.
Better, right? There's still some things that are too loud. Those Tweety birds are still a little loud, but I can hear the dialogue. The sound effects aren't overwhelming. The music is a little overwhelming. I could always grab that music and just bring it down a couple more decibels. Let's do a 3 dB chunk.
The last box of 20.
And it helps. But again, we're roughing in. So now we need to move to the next step. Now, when you watch through this video, you'll see that he uses the same thing we used in Adobe Premiere. He just uses these little volume keyframe lines instead of using this clip volume. Doesn't matter which approach you take, but I just like to make little clip volume adjustments here to the whole clip at first, because the keyframe volume, we know that we can go through and we can turn things up or down specifically using that. So I like to adjust the overall clip volume here personally, and Pro Tools didn't have that when he was recording this video. Pro Tools didn't have the ability to make a clip volume adjustment without using this line. But you would get the same effect if you came up and you just grabbed this line, you turn the whole thing down or the whole thing up. Okay, so there's no difference there. Undo. All right, but now we need to tackle the next step. We're not trying to get things perfect. Now we need to determine if we need an EQ. So we're going to solo the track and listen to it. We're going to find and fix any tonal problems. Now, how many of you have ever been in a car and you're listening to a song and your jam comes on and you're like, man, this is great, but it's not bumping and I need some more low end. So you grab the bass and you turn it up. Has anyone ever adjusted that? Right, because you needed more bass. Has anyone ever done the opposite? Like, this is really bright. Like the high frequencies kind of hurting my ears. And you find the high frequencies and you turn them down. That's all EQing is. So we want to solo the track and listen and fix the tonal problem. Now, he uses a different EQ when you're watching this, but I want you to understand how to put an EQ on and fix it. So let's switch to our mixer and go to our dialogue track. And I'm going to solo it and let's listen.
The last box of Twinkies that I or anyone would enjoy.
Now, in your headphones, you might hear that there's a little bit of woofiness happening.
The last box of Twinkies.
There's some rumble and some on the very bottom end. It's harder to hear on these speakers, but in your headphones, you will. So let's go to their effects slot. And the very first one, we'll click on the arrow, go to the EQ, filter and EQ, and go to the parametric equalizer. This is going to look very similar to what he's using in the demo video. So just open that up. Now, just because this question got asked a few times last hour, if you accidentally close this window, you can open it again just by double clicking on the parametric EQ for that track. If you want to remove the plugin, you can click on the little arrow and choose remove effect. But I'm going to go put on this parametric EQ. And this is the one that when it's loaded up, we can do a couple things. First, you can see it's already boosting and cutting some things. So I'm going to change this preset to default. And that's going to take away all boosts and cut and just play the sound that's actually there. So choose your preset and change it to default. Now, let's figure out what this EQ actually does. It's actually really simple. Down here at the bottom, you see all these bands. 1 through 5, which I'll have a number here on this thing, will all let you boost or cut lows, mids, or highs. So let's go down to number 1 and boost it way up. And watch, actually just watch here and listen and observe. So here's my voice.
The last box of Twinkies.
And do you see how these peaks here all show you how much energy there is at different frequencies, low frequencies, mid frequencies, highs. So if I turn this flat EQ into a boost, I'm now boosting the lowest lows.
The last box of Twinkies.
You hear the rumble now?
All the time.
Okay, but if I move it up.
There's an expiration date on Twinkies and the Hostess factories are gone. So someday very soon.
Now we're boosting the low mids. Now we're boosting the upper mids.
You probably won't survive the next 10 minutes. But
if I boost the sibilance frequencies, you can even see. You see the S's hitting here. And so if we boost those, we get more of them. So that's all an EQ is the ability to selectively boost
the last box of Twinkies
or cut frequencies.
All the time. The whole universe.
So if I want to get rid of all the S sounds, I can just look at them, watch for where the S's happen.
The last box of Twinkies that I or anyone.
If I turn those down,
all the time. The whole universe.
You notice it's very difficult to hear. So that's what an EQ is and what it does. So here's how we fix something like this. We start here, and if I listen to this dialogue,
Last.
you hear the excess kind of
Last.
woof. There's some little extra low end, and I can really hear it if I turn it up.
Whole universe. There's an expiration.
Like something else going on in the background.
Hostess factors.
So all we have to do to get rid of that
Someday very soon.
is turn that boost into a little bit of a cut. I don't have to cut it all the way out.
The last.
That kind of makes it sound a little empty.
I or anyone would enjoy.
But even cutting it out a little bit gets rid of some of that. So I want you to take that, boost to the frequency first, sweep it around until you hear something that makes it sound worse, and turn that boost into a little cut. Can't do it without headphones. Don't even try. If you're not listening, there's no way to know if you're doing anything good. Laura, do you need to steal some headphones from one of the other tables? Yeah. Or using, oh, you have some here. Yeah. All right, pop to me real quick. So we're just going to do 3 quick EQ adjustments to make a simple fix. So here's how we approach this.
The last box of Twinkies.
Is there any
And I
excess junk on this one? Yeah, it sounds like the low frequencies. So we can either boost and sweep around and try to find if there's a specific frequency and cut it. Or sometimes when we need to make general EQ adjustments, we can use these on the very edges. So here you see this bottom one says L. Guess what that means? Low. So if you push that one up or down, you see it doesn't have a peak. It looks like kind of a shelf, like a continental shelf. And that either boosts all of the low frequencies
that I or anyone
or
would
it
enjoy
cuts all the
time.
low
The whole
frequencies.
universe.
So the high and the low shelving EQs will let us just gently turn down all the lows or turn them up. And the high shelf will do the opposite for the highs. The last one that we will use is this one that's turned off by default, the high pass filter or the low pass filter. And you'll notice this doesn't gently turn down the lows, it cuts them off. It just falls off a cliff. So here's what we're gonna do with this vocal. We're gonna clean up that low frequency. So we hit play.
The last box of
I'm gonna pull this up until I hear it cutting into his voice.
all the time.
If I go too high, I'll hear I cut off too much of the low end.
So someday very soon.
And then I'm going to turn it off and on to hear if I hear the difference. So I should be able to, this is off.
The last box of Twinkies.
I can hear the
that
lows.
I or anyone would enjoy for all the
When I
time.
turn it on, I hear I've cut out that excess kind of windy noise in the bottom. So pull out that high pass filter and cut off the lows on this one. All right. Let's do the same thing, or not the same thing. Let's try a slightly different thing. Same sort of thing though. If I unsolo his vocal, are there any tracks that are kind of making it difficult to hear some of the intelligibility of my words? What tracks might be kind of conflicting?
The last box of Twinkies that I or anyone will enjoy for all the time. The whole universe.
Tweety's kind of
There's
are,
an expiration date and hostess.
but even that music is a little in the way. So let's go to the music, and I'm going to go and put a EQ plugin on it, parametric EQ on the music track. And I'm going to go and change it to its default, so it's not doing anything. And in this case, if I look at this music,
The last box of Twinkies.
do you see when it's bing, 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 bing? Watch where the energy is when those ding, 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 ding happens.
The last box of Twinkies.
Do you see them?
That I or anyone will enjoy for all the time. The whole universe.
So I'm going to grab this high shelf because I don't want to use this low pass filter that just cuts off all the highs. I want to use this high shelf so I can gently turn down those high frequencies so they're not clashing with my vocal.
The last box of Twinkies that I or anyone will enjoy for all the time. And the whole universe. There's an expiration date on Twinkies.
So by bringing down the high frequencies on that music, now it's not going to clash with the vocal quite as much.
The last box of Twinkies that I or anyone will enjoy for all the time. And the whole universe. There's an expiration date on
Nice. So a little EQ goes a long way towards just helping us cut some excess junk out. So by pulling these highs down,
The last box.
you can turn it off.
The last box of Twinkies that I or
And here
anyone
it's cutting through harder.
will enjoy for all the time. The whole universe.
But boy, those birds are definitely tweeting a lot. I'm going to pull their tweetiness down 3 or 4 dB.
The last box of Twinkies
Better.
that I
All right. How you doing? Able to EQ that? Let's do one more. Let's go find this wrapper and let's set some in and out points around it. So go to your wrapper in your edit window and set the in and out points around it. So this will just loop this part over and over. And let's make sure that we've got it. I'm going to go ahead and solo it out. And go and put a parametric EQ on that track. And default it. All right. So let's say I'm listening to this wrapper. And I want that crispy crunchiness to cut through a little bit more. I hear the wrapper, but it's not really like crunchy. And I feel like when I unsolo it,
there's an expiration.
it's there, but it's unclear. So, and I could just turn it up, but then it's just louder. That doesn't really sound right either. So instead, what I'm going to do is find the crunch. When I hit play, I can see it somewhere around here, but I'm just going to boost, sweep around until I hear the crunchiness that I like. So you tell me when we really hear that crunch come out. There's some crunch. There's some maybe brighter crunch. And then I'll just make that boost a little bit more gentle. And what we can do is this bottom setting, the Q, makes it either affect a narrow range of frequencies or a wider range. Let's see if we made a difference. Original. Extra crispy. Do you hear that crunch come out? Okay, so that's what EQing is doing. Do the same thing, pop it on, push it up just a little bit, sweep it around until you find the crunch, and then expand that Q, the bottom setting here that's currently set to 2, so it's affecting a little bit wider range. All right. All right, so what is that process? Well, when we're mixing, we solo the track, we listen to it. If it has any problems, like the rumble on the bottom of that vocal, some hollowness, sibilance, then we use the EQ to fix it, to cut those things out. We can also use it to go in and add some energy like we did to the crunchiness of the wrapper so that it sounded and it cut through the mix a little bit more. And then we would repeat that for each track. Now, next, we need to look at whether we need compression. So this is a perfect time to really listen to this vocal. And with our roughed in levels, now that we have the music and the ambiences at least roughed in, we want to listen to the dialogue and hear, are there words that are too loud? They're much louder than the rest. And are there words that are too quiet? Are we losing some? So if I hit play right now,
Just any box of Twinkies, the last. box.
tell me, do we lose any of the words at the beginning or the end?
All the time. The whole universe. There's an expiration date for Twinkies and Hostess factories are gone. It's gonna be
Yeah.
Very soon. Last little Twinkie gauge is gonna hit empty. Now, truth, you probably won't survive the next few minutes.
So certain words are because you won't survive. So we're losing some of those words. And that's because there's too much dynamic range. The dynamic range is the difference between the loud words or the loud sounds and the quiet sounds. So if that's too loud, imagine if I was teaching class
Just any box of
and we had
Twinkies,
background
the
sounds going.
last box.
And sometimes I was just like,
I
at this level,
all the
how
time.
difficult is that going to hear? And then if I got louder again, then I dropped back down and all of a sudden. So if you have too much dynamic range, it's like, wait, what was the quiet thing? I can't hear that. So now in this case, what we can do, we could of course go through and individually use our keyframe automation to turn up additional words, but there's also a processor that'll do that a little bit for us, and it's called a compressor. So let's go to our dialogue track. And since I can tell this dialogue is a little bit too quiet, I'm going to go to its next slot and go to amplitude and compression. And then I will go to dynamics. Now let's choose a little, I'll choose a preset in here. He actually, in the video, he walks through choosing a specific preset, but let's go with this preset of, actually, no, you know what? Let's not do dynamics. They've got multiple plugins for this. Let's do dynamics processing, because this actually will, I think, be a little easier to understand what's happening. So choose dynamics processing. So wherever you put on the dynamics one, just go click on its arrow again, dynamics processing. All right. Now in dynamics processing, let's go to the preset and let's choose a voiceover, since this is going to be a voiceover. Now, what in the heck is happening here? Well, when this is set to default, watch this dialogue and see what this number shows. Because you see all these decibel meters, dB, 0 is over here and 0 is over here. When we watch his voice,
Just any box. Just any box.
we see how loud his voice is.
That I.
So here's the quiet parts.
All the time.
Here's his loud parts. Make sense?
There's an expiration date.
If we push anything above this diagonal line, anything down there is getting turned up. So
Just any box of Twinkies, the last box of Twinkies that I or anyone would enjoy for all of
so see the stuff quieter than this point. This point's called the threshold. The stuff quieter than that right now is getting turned up. How much? A heck of a lot.
Just any box of Twinkies.
So if I pulled this threshold down even lower, the quiet stuff will get even louder.
Just any box of Twinkies, the last box of Twinkies that I or anyone would enjoy for all the time in the whole universe. There's an expiration.
Yeah, when it slips beneath that threshold, this is actually turned up. So what happens is, typically with a compressor, we pull this side down. So those loudest words, when they get up to this point, they actually get turned down. And that makes the louder words closer in volume to the quiet words.
Just any box of Twinkies, the last box.
Now I could make them even quieter. So now you see, as he gets to those louder words, this thing is actually turning them down. That's what a compressor does. Make the loud sounds quieter. And anything below the threshold, we can make the loud sounds or the quiet sounds louder. So you see, when we choose voiceover, it's guessing at where to put the threshold, but it's turning the loudest words down a little bit and the quieter words up. So that makes the whole voice more similar in volume. And how much more similar? That's what this meter is showing you. This is showing you how much it's turning down the quiet words. So it starts up here at 0. And if you see it turn down things even more,
Just any box of Twinkies, the last box of Twinkies that I or anyone.
you can hear the quiet parts are really kind of
There's an expiration.
noisy. So we're going to start with this voiceover and then pull the quiet stuff. I don't need it down quite or need to boost the quiet stuff up that much.
Just any box of Twinkies, the last box of.
But I'm just shooting for about 3 or 4 decibels of gain reduction. In other words, it's turning down those loudest words just a little bit so they're closer in volume to the quiet words.
Just any box of Twinkies, the last box of Twinkies that I or anyone will enjoy for all the time and the whole universe.
And that's made all the words a little bit closer in volume together. So choose your voiceover preset, pull that threshold down just a little bit for the, or not the threshold, but the bottom of it. So it's not cranking his quiet words up.
Box of Twinkies, the last box of Twinkies.
Otherwise his breaths will sound as loud as his words.
Just any box of Twinkies, the last box of Twinkies that I or anyone will enjoy for all the time.
All right. Now we've got other sounds in here we can continue to manipulate, but just adding that compressor is going to make this vocal stand out more now.
Just any box of Twinkies, the last box of Twinkies that I or anyone will enjoy for all the time and the whole universe. There's an expiration date on the Twinkies and hope this.
All right. You go through, make that little adjustment with your dynamics processor. Should hear your voice cutting through a little bit better. All right, last thing. Let me show you one other way that you can apply compression. This is a slightly different way. But in this case, if I came to, for example, this horror, scary human male panting sound, if we watch our meters, we can tell it's a lot louder at some parts and quieter in the others. So you see these big loud breaths and then these quiet things. Look at the level down here and see how loud this is. So the loud part of the breath is up here at -20. And the quiet part's at -36. So if we have that in the mix, we'll probably only hear the loud parts, but not the quiet ones. So we're really kind of missing that quieter part. So in this case, we could go back to our mixer, go to my panting sound. I'm going to add another compression, dynamics processing. And let's just go with something like smooth this vocal out. And I'm going to look to see if it's turning any loud stuff down. Barely. It's not quite getting loud enough to turn it down. So just grab the threshold and let's just pull that down until the loud parts are being turned down more. Now you hear the loud part of the breath and the quiet part are closer in volume because it's turning down all the loud. And then once we've made that adjustment, we can either turn up the clip itself or turn up its fader if we want more of it. And now it's all cutting through better. That's okay. You're not going to turn this in. This is just for us to have something to work on and practice with together. All right, last thing for today. If you can do all of these steps, you're not going to have any difficulty finishing this project. You're bringing in your sound effects, you're putting them in place, and you follow these first few steps to get to this point so that your overall track or your overall audio story is roughed in, kind of ready to go. Next time, you're going to basically spend next class going through. You should watch this video. So that's why I say watch during class. I will throw some sort of quiz or something right at the beginning of the next class to make sure people watched it. And then use this how to mix audio stories to work through these first few steps. The last one we'll touch on today is checking your edits and your fades. We want to make sure all of the edits have fades. So if we're over here looking at this dialogue track, I'm going to come to every one of them. And let's say this one, for example. Look at what happens here at the beginning of this dialogue.
There's a box of tweets.
Even with that EQ that we've added, you can hear the audio come in. So I would come and I would trim off my edit, but then 100% of the time, I'm going to use these fade tools right here to add a little fade. Now, do not have the fade go over the audio or you will hear
There's a box of Twinkies down in that.
it takes too long to come up. So we want our fades to end right before the audio.
There's a box of Twinkies down.
And we always want fades to fade out. So I'm going to go around to each clip. Every single clip should have a fade in and a fade out on it.
Right.
So even that one, I'm going to trim off the excess. I'm going to add a little fade. Come down to my wrapper. Maybe unsolo these things. Nope, you just use the use these little fade handles. Add a little fade, add a little fade. So there's not a Command D because you actually have way more editing ability here. So in this case, you see you can pull it out, but then you can drag it up and down to determine the shape of the fade, which is not something you can do easily in Premiere. So you can just dial in the fade exactly as you want. And if you overlap two clips, it will cross fade, it'll fade one out while fading the other one in. So everybody go through now. For lasting today and definitely before next class, go through and add fades to all of your own audio clips. So I want to make sure we've got little fades in there and that I'm not accidentally fading over parts of the sound that I want. But every single clip should have a visible, audible, nice little fade. I say an audible fade, a visible fade for sure for our purposes in this class. Okay, so all of your own clips should also have fades. Nothing should just come in out of nowhere. And let's see what we've done in the course of an hour.
There's a box of Twinkies down in that mini bar.
So here's the last thing that you do. You don't even have, not even the last thing. This is something that you can do all the way throughout. When you want to know if it's working, you take your volume and you cut it in half. You bring it down a ways and listen to it and see which things disappear and which things that might jump out. So I'm going to pull this level down and you tell me what things are missing. Here we go. Anything sticking out? Those Tweety birds were really leaping out if you didn't hear that. So I would pop in then, and the Tweeties are going to get, I'm going to pull them down an extra 2 or 3 dB. Zombies are overwhelming him. Think his voice could come up a little bit. Maybe the ambience. This trick alone will make your mixes a lot better because when you cut it by half, your brain really has to listen. And then you'll find yourself dialing things in much more accurately in a way that will work better when you turn it back up. So even those little tiny adjustments I just made, let's see if that made a difference. Here it is, back at regular volume.
Not just any box of Twinkies, the last.
And it
box
sounds
of
better.
Twinkies that
So
I
regularly and routinely,
all the time.
cut your volume way down and do a slight rebalancing. You will find you'll get a much better mix every time.
Someday very soon, life's little Twinkie gauge is gonna hit empty. Now, truth, You probably will.
Good job. All right, we will see you guys in a week, but don't forget to work your way through this, watch through this video for next class, and we'll see you